The grand atrium of the Galactic Council floated in the endless dark of space. It was a massive station made of crystal and metal built around a dying star that glowed red and angry through the transparent walls. Ships from 47 different species were docked at its ports. Inside, creatures of every shape and size gathered in the great hall, where the fate of civilizations was decided. Ambassador Allor Vance stood at the center of this hall. She was a small woman compared to most of the aliens around her. Her gray suit was simple and clean. Her dark hair was pulled back tight. Her hands did not shake even though she knew what was coming. The council seats rose up around her like stadium. Each seat held a representative from a different species. Some had scales, some had fur, some had shells or tentacles or bodies made of living light. All of them were watching her with eyes that ranged from curious to hostile. All had come to ask for something important. Humanity wanted to join the defensive pact. This was an alliance of the most powerful species in the galaxy. They had joined together to fight the Vorax swarm, an enemy that had already consumed 3 star systems and showed no signs of stopping. Honored representatives, Allor said. Her voice was calm and clear. Earth requests membership in the defensive pact. We offer our ships, our soldiers, and our technology. We ask only for the chance to stand beside you against the common enemy. For a moment there was silence. Then a sound filled the chamber. It was a clicking, chattering noise that Aurora recognized as laughter. The sound came from the Calvathi Archon. He was a massive creature, nearly 12 ft tall. When he stood on his 4 legs, his body was covered in black armor that was not armor at all, but his own shell. His head had large compound eyes that reflected Alara's image 1,000 times. His mandibles clicked together as he laughed. The humans wish to fight, the Archon said. His voice was translated by a small device, but the mockery needed no translation. How amusing. Alla kept her face still. We have fought wars for thousands of years. Our military is trained and ready. Yes, the Archon said. We have studied your military. We have studied your history. This is why we laugh. A screen appeared in the air above. Images began to play. She recognized them immediately and felt her stomach turn cold. The images showed human soldiers, but not soldiers in battle. They showed soldiers sitting hospital beds with empty eyes, soldiers screaming in their sleep, soldiers who could not stop their hands from shaking, soldiers who flinched at loud sounds, soldiers who could not leave their homes, soldiers who had taken their own lives. You call this condition many names, the Archon said. Shell shock battle, fatigue, post-traumatic stress. We have no word for it in our language. Do you know why? Alla did not answer. Because it doesn't happen to us, the Archon continued. When a Calvathi warrior is damaged in mind, they are consumed by the hive. They do not become this. He gestured at the images with one of his upper limbs, broken, weak, useless. A new voice spoke. This one came from the Dreeth representative, a being that looked like a machine but was actually a living creature merged with technology. Our warriors do not suffer this weakness. Either our cybernetic enhancements remove the parts of the brain that create fear and trauma. A Drael soldier cannot be broken because we have removed the capacity for breaking. Another voice joined in. The Oranthi representative was a tall, thin creature with skin like pale paper and eyes that glowed with inner light. The Oranthi are born, knowing they will return to the collective when they die. Death holds no fear for us. We cannot be traumatized by what we embrace. One by one, the representatives spoke. Each one explained why their species was superior. Each one pointed to humanity's veterans and called them evidence of weakness. Ara listened to all of it. She thought about the veterans she knew. Her own father had served in 2 wars. He still woke up sometimes with nightmares. He still could not watch certain movies or hear certain sounds. But he had also raised 3 children, built a house with his own hands, and volunteered at the hospital every week. He was the strongest person she knew. You see trauma as a defect, Ara said, when the chamber finally went quiet. But you do not understand what it represents. Our soldiers are not broken because they are weak. They carry wounds because they survived things that should have killed them. They came back from hell and kept living. The Archon made that clicking laugh again. Pretty words, it said, but words do not win wars. You bring us soldiers who freeze in battle, soldiers who cannot function, soldiers who refuse to fight again. What use are such creatures against the swarm? They are not creatures, Ara said. Her voice was harder now. They are survivors. They are cowards, the Archon replied, and we do not ally with cowards. The vote was quick. 45 species voted against humanity's membership. 2 abstained. None voted in favor. The council has decided, the Archon announced. Humanity is too psychologically fragile for galactic warfare. Your petition is denied. You may leave. Ara wanted to argue more. She wanted to explain what they did not understand. But she saw the closed faces around her, the dismissive gestures, the turned backs. There was nothing more to say. She returned to her ship alone. Journey back to Earth took 6 days. R spent most of that time staring at the stars and thinking about what had happened. The council had looked at humanity's greatest veterans and seen only weakness. They had looked at men and women who had fought through the worst experiences possible and decided they were worthless. When her ship landed in Geneva, the news was already spreading. Someone had leaked the council recordings. Every screen on Earth was showing the Archon's words. Every human heard themselves called cowards. The reaction was strange. People were angry, yes, but there was something else too. Something quiet and cold that Ara could not quite name. In a hospital in Texas, Colonel Marcus Chen turned off the screen in his room. He had served 3 tours in different wars. He had seen friends die in front of him. He had killed enemies who were barely old enough to shave. He had spent 5 years in therapy learning how to live with all of it. His hands used to shake so badly he could not hold a cup of coffee. They were steady now most days. Anyway, Marcus looked at his hands. He thought about the Archon's words. Coward, broken, useless. He had been called worse things by the voices in his own head. He had fought those voices every single day for years. He had won that fight mostly. He was still winning it. The Archon had never fought a battle like that. None of those aliens had. They had removed their fear, or they had never felt it, or they simply died. When they became damaged, they had never learned to live with the cracks in their minds. Marcus smiled. It was not a nice smile. His phone buzzed. A message from an old friend, another veteran, then another. His phone would not stop buzzing all over the world the same thing was happening. Veterans were reaching out to each other, men and women who had been told they were broken were finding each other in the dark. They did not talk about revenge. They did not talk about proving themselves. They just talked. They shared memories and fears and small victories. They reminded each other that they had already survived the unsurvivable. The galaxy thought humans were cowards. The galaxy thought trauma was weakness. The galaxy had no idea what it was talking about. Marcus Chen went to sleep that night without nightmares for the first time in weeks. He dreamed instead of stars and battles and a reckoning that was coming. 3,000 m away, Vance sat in her office and read the messages flooding her computer. Veterans from every country were contacting the government. They were not asking for pity. They were not demanding recognition. They were asking one simple question: when does the swarm arrive? Ara leaned back in her chair. The council had called humanity's veterans cowards, but cowards did not ask to face the enemy. Cowards did not volunteer for the fight that everyone else had rejected them from. Something was building, something the galaxy had never seen before. An army of broken soldiers who had put themselves back together. An army of survivors who knew exactly what fear tasted like and had learned to swallow it. The council would learn. Sooner or later they would all learn. Ara began to write her report. 3 months passed after the council rejected humanity. In that time the galaxy changed. The Vorex swarm moved faster than anyone had predicted. Military experts had calculated that the pact had at least 2 years before the swarm reached the frontier colonies. They were wrong by 22 months. The first warning came from a mining station on the edge of Kelvathi space. The station sent a distress signal that lasted 14 seconds before cutting off. When scout ships arrived to investigate, they found nothing. The station was gone. The asteroid it had been built on was gone. Even the debris was gone. The swarm had consumed everything and left only empty space behind. The Kelvathi Archon ordered his forward battalions to engage. 20,000 warriors, each one bred for combat from birth, each one incapable of feeling fear. They were the finest soldiers the Hive had ever produced. They had never lost a battle. The battle lasted 6 hours. The swarm did not fight like any enemy the Kelvathi had faced before. They did not form lines or hold positions. They moved like water, like a flood of living hunger that poured around every defense and through every gap. When the Kelvathi charged forward in their traditional attack formations, the swarm simply parted and let them through. Then it closed behind them, cutting them off from retreat. Kelvathi warriors died singing their war hymns. They died with their mandibles still clicking in defiance. They died bravely and gloriously and completely uselessly. The swarm sprayed clouds of organic acid into the air. The acid ate through Kelvathi armor in seconds and dissolved the flesh beneath. Warriors who had never known fear died screaming in confusion. They had been trained to fight enemies who stood and faced them. They had no training for an enemy that melted them from the inside. When the last Kelvathi warrior fell, the swarm paused for exactly 3 minutes. It was feeding, then it moved on to the next system. The Draelith Continuum responded next. They sent their cybernetic legions, warriors who had replaced their weak organic parts with superior machines. Their bodies were metal and crystal. Their minds were uploaded into combat networks that let them share information. Instantly, they felt no fear because they had removed the brain tissue that created fear. They felt no pain because they had replaced their nerves with sensors. The swarm adapted. It took the swarm less than a day to develop a new weapon. They released electromagnetic parasites, tiny organisms that burrowed into the Dreeth machines and rewired their systems. Warriors who had been shooting at the swarm suddenly turned their weapons on their own allies. Combat networks that had coordinated thousands of soldiers began spreading false information. Dreeth legions fell into chaos as their own technology betrayed them. The survivors retreated. There were not many survivors. The Orenthi collective tried a different approach. They were a psionic species, beings who could attack with their minds. An Orenthi warrior could reach into an enemy's thoughts and crush their will to fight. They could create illusions so real that enemies killed themselves trying to escape. Nightmares that did not exist. The swarm had no minds to attack. Each organism in the swarm was barely more intelligent than an insect. They operated on pure instinct, controlled by chemical signals. From the hive, the Orenthi reached out with their psychic powers and found nothing to grab. It was like trying to fight the ocean by punching water. The Orenthi died with their eyes still glowing, their powers useless against an enemy that had no fear, no hope, no thought at all. 3 weeks after the first attack, the defensive pact had lost 4 star systems and 18 million soldiers. The swarm had lost perhaps 2 million organisms. It had billions more. The council met again, this time on a flagship that was already running. The grand atrium was gone, consumed along with the dying star it had orbited. The representatives gathered in a cramped conference room that smelled of fear. The Archon was there, but he was changed. One of his upper limbs was missing, lost in the battle where his personal guard had been destroyed. His compound eyes no longer reflected confidence. They reflected something that looked almost like the fear he had always claimed his species could not feel. We cannot stop them, the Dreeth representative said. Its voice was flat, mechanical, but there was something broken in it. We have tried everything. Our warriors are superior in every way. But superiority does not matter against an enemy that simply absorbs our attacks and keeps coming. Perhaps we should negotiate, the Orenthi suggested. Offer them territory, resources. Perhaps they can be satisfied. You cannot negotiate with hunger, another representative said. They do not want territory, they want to eat. The argument went on for hours. Plans were proposed and rejected. Strategies were debated and discarded. No one had an answer. The mightiest species in the galaxy, the ones who had removed fear and weakness from their warriors, could not find a way to win. Then a communication signal cut through the noise. It was coming from Earth. The screen flickered to life. Ambassador Allor Vance appeared. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. Honored representatives, she said, humanity has been watching the war. We offer our assistance. The Archon's mandibles clicked, but this time the sound was bitter rather than amused. You offer assistance. Your species cannot even join the pact. You are too fragile. Remember, too broken. I remember, said, but our offer stands. We are sending a fleet to the front lines. 10,000 soldiers, all veterans, all Volunteers, veterans, the Dreeth representative, leaned forward. You mean the damaged ones, the ones with the psychological weakness? I mean the ones who have already survived wars, Ara replied. Ones you called cowards. There was silence in the room, then the Archon laughed again, but the sound was hollow. Now, without any real amusement, you send us your broken ones to die. This is your great assistance. This is your contribution to the war. Ara smiled. It was a cold smile, the kind that did not reach her eyes. We are sending the ones who already know what dying feels like. The ones who have looked at death and kept going anyway. You removed fear from your warriors. You bred it out or cut it out or burned it away, but you never thought about what that meant. Enlighten us. The Archon said it meant your warriors never learned to function while afraid. They never developed strategies for fighting through terror. They never built the mental strength that comes from facing your worst fears every single day and refusing to quit. All leaned closer to the camera. Our veterans have that strength, every single one of them. They earned it in the hardest school in the galaxy. Pretty words, the Archon said, echoing his mockery from 3 months ago. Words do not win wars. No, agreed. Survivors win wars. And that is all we are sending you. Survivors. She ended the transmission. The council sat in silence. Their superior warriors had failed. Their advanced technology had been turned against them. Their psionic powers were useless. All they had left was a fleet of broken humans coming to fight a war that everyone else was losing. On Earth, the fleet was already launching. The ships were not the newest or the fastest. They had been built for transport, not for glory, but the soldiers inside them were something the galaxy had never seen before. Colonel Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the carrier Perseverance and watched Earth shrink behind them. Around him, 10,000 veterans were preparing for war. They checked their weapons. They ran their drills. They talked quietly with each other, sharing stories and jokes and fears. None of them pretended they were not afraid. They were all afraid. That was the point, sir. A young lieutenant approached Chen. Message from command. The council has officially refused our help. They say we can observe, but we are not to engage the enemy. Chen smiled, noted. What should I tell them? Tell them we received their message and tell them we will do whatever we decide is necessary when we arrive. The lieutenant hesitated. Sir, they might see that as a declaration of hostility. Chen looked at the stars ahead of them, at the darkness where the swarm was waiting. The swarm is hostile. We are just stubborn. There is a difference. The fleet flew on into the dark. Behind them, Earth waited. Ahead of them, the enemy waited. And somewhere in between, the galaxy was about to learn what cowards could do when they decided to stop running. The carrier Perseverance was not a pretty ship. It had been built 40 years ago for moving cargo and troops between Earth and the lunar colonies. Its hull was scarred from decades of service. Its engines were reliable but slow. Its weapons were defensive only, meant to stop pirates rather than fight wars. But the people inside it were something else entirely. Colonel Marcus Chen walked the corridors every day, watching his soldiers prepare. They had given themselves a name during the journey. They called themselves the Shattered Battalions. Some people might have thought the name was shameful, an admission of weakness. The veterans wore It with pride, Private Maria Torres was. In the training room when Chen passed by, she was a small woman with dark hair and eyes that always seemed to be looking at something no one else could see. She had served 2 tours in a jungle war that had killed most of her squad. The official record said she had post-traumatic stress disorder. The unofficial truth was that she had not slept a full night in 6 years. Right now she was teaching close quarters combat to a group of younger soldiers. Her movements were fast and precise. Her hands did not shake at all when she was fighting. They only shook when she was trying to rest. The aliens fight with honor, Torres was saying. They charge straight ahead. They stand in formations. They die in pretty patterns. She grabbed one of the trainees and threw him to the mat. We do not fight with honor. We fight to survive. If the enemy expects you to go left, go right. If they expect you to attack, run away. If they expect you to run away, attack. Never be where they think you will be. Chen nodded and moved on. In the engineering section, Sergeant Adiz Akono was working on the defensive systems. She was a tall woman with strong hands and a face that rarely smiled. 7 years ago she had watched her entire squad die when their vehicle hit an explosive device. She had been the only survivor for 2 years after that. She had not spoken to anyone. Now she spoke plenty, but always about practical things, never about feelings. A Dalith observer was standing near her, watching. With its mechanical eyes, the council had sent observers to monitor the human fleet, expecting to witness a slaughter. This particular drill had been assigned to study human behavior. Your defensive grids are inefficient, the Drews said. The placement of your sensor nodes creates blind spots. Akono did not look up from her work. The blind spots are intentional. That makes no logical sense. It makes perfect sense if you think about it. The swarm learns from every fight. They adapt to whatever they see, so we show them things that are not real. We show them weaknesses that are actually traps. When they exploit the blind spots, they walk into kill zones. Akono finally looked at the drilleth. Your people do not think this way. You build perfect defenses and expect them to work. We build broken defenses and expect the enemy to fall. For them, the Dralith was silent for a long moment. This is deceptive. Yes, our warriors do not fight with deception. It is dishonorable. Akono smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Your honorable warriors are dead. We are still here. Honor is expensive. Survival is practical. The Draith had no response. Chen continued his walk through the ship. In the medical bay he found Captain James Yen reviewing tactical maps. Yen was an older man with gray hair and a calm face. He had served in more wars than he could remember. The worst one had ended with him lying beneath a pile of dead bodies for 3 days, too wounded to move, listening to enemy soldiers search for survivors. He had learned patience in those 3 days, the kind of patience that most people could not understand. The swarm attacks in waves, UN said without looking up. Every report shows the same pattern. First wave tests the defenses. Second wave finds weaknesses. Third wave exploits those weaknesses. Fourth wave consumes everything. He tapped the map. The aliens try to stop the first wave. They put everything they have into that initial defense. When it fails, they have nothing left. What would you do differently? Shen asked. Let the first Wave through, let them think they have. 1, fall back and make them chase us. Every step they take, they spread out. More every minute they spend chasing us. We learn more about how they move. Yuan finally looked at Chen, then we hit them when they are spread thin, not from the front where they expected, from the sides, from behind, from underground, from places they never thought to look. Chen nodded. The council wants us to observe only, no engagement. The council is losing this war. We did not come here to observe, we came here to win. That night Chen called a meeting of all senior officers. They gathered in the cargo bay, the largest open space on the ship. Veterans sat on crates and floor plates and pieces of equipment. None of them wore formal uniforms. Most of them had scars. In 2 days we reached the front line. Chen said, the council has ordered us to stay back and watch. They do not want our help. They still think we are cowards. No one laughed. No one needed to. The Kelvathi have lost 60% of their forces. The Dreeth have lost more. The Oranthi are nearly gone. The swarm is approaching the last defensive position before the core worlds. If that position falls, the war is over. Shen paused. He looked around at the faces of his soldiers. He saw fear in many of them. He also saw something else, something hard and patient and ready. These aliens have never been afraid. Chen continued. They bred out fear or cut it out or simply never had it. They think that makes them better than us. They think fear is weakness. He shook his head. Fear is not weakness. Fear is a tool. It keeps you alive when everything around you is trying to kill you. It makes you careful. It makes you smart. It makes you dangerous in ways that the fearless will never understand. Sergeant Okonkwo spoke up. They expect us to die like their warriors died charging into the swarm and getting eaten. They do. Chen agreed. They will be disappointed. So what is the plan? Private Tours asked. The plan is simple. We do not fight their war. We fight our war. We use everything we learned in all the conflicts that broke us and put us back together. We use tricks and traps and lies. We use patience and endurance and the kind of stubbornness that only people who have survived hell can understand. Captain Yuan stood up. Swarm has never lost because no one has ever fought them properly. The aliens charge forward and die. They refuse to retreat because retreat is shameful. They refuse to hide because hiding is cowardly. They would rather die with honor than live with cunning. He smiled. We have no such limitations. A murmur ran through the crowd. Chen saw soldiers nodding, saw hands that had been shaking become still, saw eyes that had been haunted become focused. We are the shattered battalions. Chen said, we were broken by our wars and we put ourselves back together. That is something these aliens cannot understand. They do not know what it means to be broken and keep going. They do not know what it means to be afraid every day and still show up to fight. They do not know what it means to survive. He raised his voice. But we know. Every single one of us knows. And in 2 days we are going to teach the galaxy what that knowledge is worth. The cargo bay erupted in sound, not cheering. Exactly, something deeper, something that sounded like 10,000 people who had spent years feeling worthless, suddenly remembering that they were dangerous. The Draelith observer watched from the corner, recording everything. It did not understand what it was seeing. It could not comprehend the strange fire burning in these broken humans. Later it would. Learn they all would, the Perseverance flew on through the dark, carrying its cargo of survivors toward a battle that everyone expected them to lose. The shattered battalions prepared their weapons and their traps and their tricks. In 2 days they would show the galaxy what cowards could do. Arost Station was the last line of defense. Before the core worlds, it was a massive structure built into an asteroid the size of a small moon. Millions of civilians had evacuated through its ports. Now only soldiers remained. Waiting for the end, the swarm arrived at dawn local time. Not that dawn meant anything in space, but the station kept Earth Standard Time, and the first wave appeared just as the artificial lights began to brighten. 40 million organisms moved as one, a tide of chitin and acid. An endless hunger, the remaining packed forces prepared for their final stand. Kalvathi warriors sharpened their blades and sang death hymns. Dreeth soldiers checked their targeting systems and synchronized their networks. What remained of the Orient sat in meditation, preparing to die with clear minds. The human fleet hung back as the Council had ordered. They watched the first wave crash against the station's defenses. They watched the defenders fight bravely and hopelessly. They watched the second wave exploit the weaknesses the first wave had found. Then Colonel Chen gave an order and everything changed. All units engage. The Perseverance, sir. Forward, followed by the rest of the human fleet. They did not head toward the main battle. Instead, they swung around the station, positioning themselves along the swarm's flank. Kalvathi commander's voice crackled over the communication channel. Humans, you were ordered to observe. Return to your position. Negative, Chen replied. We are engaging the enemy. You can help us or you can watch. This is madness. You will be consumed. Maybe, but we will do some damage first. The human fleet opened fire, but not at the main swarm mass. They targeted the edges, the thin lines of organisms that connected the main force to its supply chains. The swarm's logistics were organic, a network of feeder creatures that processed material and sent it to the front. The aliens had ignored these creatures as unimportant. The humans knew better. Captain Wen had studied every battle report. He had noticed that the swarm always protected its fighters, but left its support creatures exposed. Cut the supply lines, he had said. Make them hungry. Hungry fighters make mistakes. The first hour of battle went according to plan. Human ships darted along the swarm's edges, destroying feeder creatures and retreating before the main force could respond. The swarm turned to face this new threat, but the humans refused to engage directly. They ran away whenever the swarm approached, then attacked again from a different angle. Cowards, the Kalvathi commander transmitted. You run from battle. We survive battles, Chen replied. Your brave warriors are dead. We are still fighting. Inside Arco Station, the ground battle was going badly. The swarm had breached the outer perimeter and was pouring through the corridors. Kalvathi warriors held their ground and were overwhelmed. Dreeth soldiers formed defensive lines and were flanked. Then the shattered battalions landed. Private Torres was in the first wave of human soldiers to enter the station. Her hands were shaking as she stepped off the transport. They always shook before combat. She had learned to ignore them. Her squad moved through the corridors differently than the alien soldiers. They did not march in formation. They did not hold positions. They moved like water flowing around obstacles, always looking for cover, always aware of their escape routes. A swarm of organisms burst through a wall ahead of them. Tors did not freeze. Her body remembered what to do, even when her mind was screaming in fear. She dropped to one knee, raised her weapon, and fired 3 precise shots into the lead creature's sensory cluster. Then she was moving again, running not toward the fight but around it. Fall back to Junction 7, she ordered. Do not engage. Directly, her squad retreated in good order, leaving proximity mines behind them. The swarm organisms followed, eager to consume the fleeing prey. They hit the mines and died in clusters. Set up firing positions at the junction. Taurus continued, let them come to us. The swarm came. Tor's hands shook the entire time. She killed 17 organisms before her weapon overheated. Then she picked up a fallen Kelvathi blade and kept fighting. Sergeant Ayanqua was leading a different team in the engineering section. The swarm was trying to reach the station's reactor. If they consumed its power core, they would gain enough energy to accelerate their assault on the core worlds. Okonkwo had set up her defensive grid exactly as she had planned. The blind spots were there, obvious weaknesses that any intelligent enemy would exploit. The swarm organisms poured through those blind spots, expecting easy prey. They found kill zones. Instead, automated turrets opened fire from hidden positions. Explosive charges detonated in sequence, collapsing corridors onto the advancing creatures. The swarm's own momentum worked against them as organisms in the back pushed forward into the slaughter. A Dralith officer watched in disbelief. You sacrificed entire sections of the defense to create these traps. Yes, Akono said, that is inefficient. Those sections could have been held. Could they? Your people tried holding every section. How did that work out? Akono reloaded her weapon. We do not try to hold everything. We choose what matters and let go of the rest. That is how you survive. Captain Ewan had the strangest mission of all. He had requested permission to take a small team deep into swarm-controlled territory. No one thought he would survive. He had smiled and said that survival was his specialty. Now he was lying motionless beneath a pile of dead swarm organisms, listening to the creature's search for living prey. His team was scattered around him, each one playing dead in their own hiding spot. They had practiced this. They had spent hours learning to slow their breathing, control their heartbeats, suppress their fear responses. The swarm organisms passed within inches of Ewan's face. Their sensory tendrils brushed against his skin. He did not move. He did not breathe. He thought about those 3 days under the bodies of his fallen comrades, and he waited. The search party moved on. Ewan counted to 1,000. Before he moved, slowly, carefully, he rose from the pile of dead creatures. His team emerged from their hiding spots. One by one, they were behind enemy lines. Now in the heart of the swarm staging area, target the coordination nodes. Ewan whispered, do not engage any fighters. We are here to blind them, not to kill them. The team spread out. Over the next 4 hours, they destroyed 23 coordination nodes, the biological structures that allowed different parts of the swarm to communicate. Each node they killed created chaos in the organisms nearby. Swarm units began attacking each other, unable to distinguish friend from foe. When they swarm finally found Huan's team, there were only 6 of them left. They retreated, fighting, not running away, but pulling back in good order, each soldier covering the others. Yuan was the last one out. An organism caught him, its claws tearing through his armor. He killed it with his sidearm, then killed the 2 that came after it. His left arm was useless, hanging by strips of muscle and torn fabric. He made it to the extraction point with 30 seconds to spare. As the transport lifted off, he looked back at the chaos his team had created. Mission complete, he reported. The swarm is fighting itself in sectors 7 through 12. On the bridge of the Perseverance, Chen received the report with grim satisfaction. The battle was not won, but it was no longer being lost. For the first time in the war, the swarm was confused. Its perfect coordination was broken. Its endless advance had slowed. The Kilvathi commander contacted him. Again, unconventional. Aeon's voice was different now. Yes, the Archon's voice was different now. The mockery was gone. Yes, they are. We have received reports from the station. Your soldiers fight like no one we have ever seen. They run away, then they attack. They hide, then they strike. They refuse to die gloriously. Glory is for the dead, Chen said. We prefer to live. The battle continued for 19 days. The shattered battalions fought for every corridor, every room, every meter of the station. They did not win through bravery or superior strength. They won through stubbornness and tricks and the absolute refusal to give up. Torres held a corridor for 6 hours, her hands shaking the entire time she held it. Anyway, Okonkwo lost 3 soldiers and felt the old grief rise up in her chest. She screamed into the grief and called in an air strike on her own position, then led her survivors out through the maintenance tunnels before the bombs fell. Yuan played dead 7 more times. Each time the swarm passed him by, each time he rose from the dead and kept fighting. On the 19th day, the swarm retreated. It was the first time in recorded history that the swarm had chosen to withdraw. They had lost 60% of their invasion force. Their coordination was shattered. Their supply lines were cut. They needed time to regroup, to adapt, to understand this new enemy that fought like nothing they had ever consumed. The shattered battalions had won, not cleanly, not gloriously, but they had won. Colonel Chen stood on the observation deck of the ruined station and watched the swarm withdraw into the darkness of space. His body ached. His mind was exhausted. Somewhere deep inside him, the old nightmares were waiting, but today he had won. Today the cowards had saved the galaxy. Tomorrow he would deal with the rest. The grand atrium had been rebuilt. The new council chamber was not as beautiful as the old one. It was smaller, simpler, built for function rather than glory. The dying star was gone, consumed by the swarm. Along with everything else in that system, the new station orbited a young blue sun, bright and hopeful. 47 representatives gathered once again. Many of them were new. The old representatives had died in the war, along with millions of their people. The survivors had learned hard lessons about bravery and honor and the price of pride. Colonel Marcus Chen stood at the center of the chamber. He wore his dress uniform, though it did not fit well anymore. He had lost weight during the battle. He had gained new scars. His hair was grayer than it had been 4 months ago. Medals hung from his chest. He had not asked for them, the council had insisted. They had created new medals specifically for the human soldier, decorations that did not exist in any alien culture. They did not know what else to give. The shattered battalions had lost 40% of their force. 4,000 men and women had died on Arco Station and in the space around it. Each death was recorded, each name was remembered, each body was recovered if possible and brought home. This confused the aliens more than anything else. The Calvathi left their dead where they fell. The Draith recycled their fallen soldiers into new components. The Aranthi believed the dead rejoined the collective and needed no physical remains, but the humans insisted on bringing their dead home. It is inefficient. A Draelith representative had said those resources could be used for the living. The dead earned the right to rest. Chen had replied, we do not abandon our people, even when they can no longer fight. Now he stood before the council, waiting for them to speak. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the Calvathi Archon rose from his seat. This was a new Archon. The old one had died in the final assault on Arrow Station. He had died fighting beside human soldiers, learning at the last moment what it meant to retreat and regroup and fight again. His successor was younger, and his eyes held something the old Archon had never shown: respect. 4 months ago, the new Archon said, this council rejected humanity's petition to join the defensive pact. We called your soldiers weak. We called them broken. We called them cowards. Chen said nothing. He waited. We wronged. The words hung in the air. In the history of the Calvathi species, no Archon had ever publicly admitted error. Such admissions were considered weakness, worthy of consumption by the hive. But the hive had learned new things in the past 4 months, many things. Your soldiers fought like no warriors we have ever seen. The Archon continued, they did not seek glory, they did not throw their lives away in beautiful charges. They fought to survive, and in doing so, they saved us all. The Draelith representative spoke next. We have analyzed your tactics. They are illogical by our standards. Your soldiers retreat when they could advance, they hide when they could fight. They use deception and misdirection rather than direct confrontation. A pause. These tactics are devastatingly effective. We have begun training our forces to use them, as have we. The Archon admitted, it is difficult. Our warriors do not understand why they should run from battle, but they are learning. The Aranthi representative raised a slender hand. We have studied your soldiers' psychological condition, what you call post-traumatic stress. We believed it was a defect, a failure of the mind. We now believe we were mistaken. Chen finally spoke. What do you believe now? We believe it is adaptation. Your soldiers face terrible things and survive them. Their minds are changed by the experience. Yes, but the changes are not weakness. They are preparation. Your veterans carry their old battles with them always. They never forget what they have survived. This makes them dangerous in ways we did not understand. Fear is not weakness, Chen said. We tried to tell you this before. Fear is a tool. It tells you when to run and when to hide and when to fight. Your warriors had no fear. They only knew how to charge forward. When charging forward failed, they had nothing else. And your soldiers, the Archon asked, my soldiers know how to do everything. They know how to attack and retreat and hide. And deceive, they know how to keep. Fighting when they are terrified, they know how to survive when survival seems impossible. Chen looked around the chamber. You remove fear from your warriors because you thought it made them weak, but you also removed their ability to adapt, to think, to survive. The chamber was silent again. Many of the representatives were recording his words. They would be studied and analyzed and taught to future generations. Ambassador Vance stepped forward. She stood beside Chen, smaller than him but no less proud. Humanity formally requests reconsideration for membership in the Defensive Pact. We believe we have demonstrated our qualifications. The vote took less than a minute. It was unanimous. Humanity was accepted. After the ceremony, Shen walked through the corridors of the new station. He was tired, the kind of tired that sleep would not fix, the kind of tired that came from months of fighting and years of surviving and decades of carrying weight that no one else could see. The Archon found him on an observation deck, watching the blue sun burn in the distance. Colonel, the Archon said, I wish to speak with you privately. Then speak. The Archon was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Your soldiers, he finally said, they fought as if they had already died and returned, as if death held no terror for them because they had faced something worse. His compound eyes reflected Chen's image. Many times, what could be worse than death? Chen thought about the question. He thought about the nightmares that still woke him some nights. He thought about the faces of friends he had lost, friends whose deaths he could not prevent. He thought about the long years of therapy, of learning to live with a mind that had been broken and slowly, painfully put back together, living with what you have done to survive, he said, and choosing to do it again. The Archon did not respond immediately. Perhaps he was trying to understand. Perhaps he could not. Your veterans, he said, the broken ones, they chose to fight even though they knew the cost. They chose to face their fears again, even though those fears had nearly destroyed them once before. Why? Chen looked at the stars. Somewhere out there the swarm was regrouping. It would return. It always returned, and when it did, humanity would be waiting, because someone had to, he said, and because we knew we could survive it. We had survived worse. Every one of us had already walked through hell and come out the other side. The swarm was just another hell. We knew the path. The Archon made a sound that might have been understanding. We called you cowards. We were very wrong. You were not entirely wrong, Shen said. We are afraid. Every single one of us is afraid all the time. The difference is that we do not let fear stop us. We carry it with us like a weapon. It makes us careful. It makes us smart. It keeps us alive. He turned to face the Archon directly. Your warriors were brave. They were strong. They were everything a soldier should be, but they did not know how to be afraid. So when they faced something that should have terrified them, they had no tools to deal with it. They could only do what they had always done. They could only charge forward and die. And your soldiers, my soldiers, know how to be afraid. They have been afraid for years, decades, their entire lives. They wake up afraid and go to sleep afraid and do their jobs in between. Fear is their constant companion. So when they face something terrifying, they do not freeze or break. They just keep doing what they have always done. They keep surviving. The Archon was quiet for a long time. Then he did something that no Kelvathi had ever done to human before. He lowered his head in a gesture of respect. Teach us, he said, teach us how to be afraid. Chen smiled. It was a tired smile, but a real one. That is not something we can teach. It is something you must learn on your own through pain and loss and survival. It is the hardest lesson in the universe, but it can be learned. Yes, it can be learned. And when you learn it, you will understand why we call ourselves the Shattered Battalions, because we were broken and we put ourselves back together, and the cracks that remain make us stronger than we ever were before. The Archon nodded. Slowly, then we will learn. However long it takes, however much it costs. The swarm was out there. More battles were coming, more pain, more loss, more fear. But humanity would face it as they had always faced it, not with glory or bravery or the absence of fear, with survival, with stubbornness, with the quiet, endless determination of those who have already been broken and refused to stay that way. The swarm will return, Chen said. Yes, we will be ready. The Archon stood beside him, learning to see the stars as humans saw them, not as points of light, but as battlefields waiting to happen, as challenges to be survived, as reminders that the universe was harsh and cruel and indifferent, and the only way to endure it was to be harsh and cruel and determined in return. Your species is strange, the Archon said. You are weak in ways we cannot understand. You break where we would hold firm. You fear where we would stand strong. Yes, and yet you survive. You survive everything. That is what cowards do. We survive whatever it takes, however much it hurts. We survive. The Archon made that clicking sound again, but this time it was not laughter. It was something else, something that sounded almost like admiration. Then may the galaxy learn to be cowards, he said, because cowards, it seems, are the only ones who truly know how to win. They stood together in silence, watching the stars burn. The war was not over. It might never be over, but humanity was ready. The Shattered Battalions were ready. They had always been ready. They had been ready since the first human ancestor learned to fear the dark and survive the night. Anyway, they had been ready since the first soldier came home broken and refused to stay broken. They had been ready forever, and now the galaxy knew it.